Hello, this video cassette recorder is from around 1974. It's a Philips N1502, takes tapes like these. I love fixing old equipment like this, except when it's my own machine and it's broken down. This is one of the ones from my studio. And the only thing that could make it worse than breaking down is breaking down with a customer's tape stuck in it. Oh dear. Okay, so I need to get the tape out and then look at the original fault, was that intermittently the function keys would not latch down the way they are now. They would refuse to latch down when it's powered up. So the first thing I need to do is get the tape out. That's a little tricky actually, because I think it's half laced. Right, let's get stuck in. Right, so I'll power up the machine and you can hear motors running and it's not lacing or switching off or anything. It's a complete mess. I'll get the top off. I've already undone the screws at the back here, so just pop the top off. Right, I can't take this door off because it won't eject, so that's one of our problems. This is the type of machine that has the worm drive loading. There were two types, one with a gearbox, plastic gearbox, and one with this worm drive. Right, let's see if we can find out why it's neither laced nor unlaced and won't give you the tape back. Okay, I've turned it round so you can see the head drum here. The lower drum rotates as part of the lacing process, and this is the loading motor here. So let's switch it on. So it's spinning the motor, the head drum. It's not completing lace up. The tape's all snarled up. So this tape shouldn't be at this position. It should be around here. Let's see if I can manually get the tape into the right place. Maybe that will help the situation. Must be very careful with the head tips. The head drum at the moment is pretty much stalled, so that means that the tape is probably taut. Can I ease some tape out? Yes, I can. Now I do know that this part of the customer tape is blank anyway, so from that point of view, at least, it's not too precious. Okay, so now it's around the correct place. I still don't think it's going to unlace or complete lacing. Well, I think it might be completed lacing. That might be good. That might be... Alright, okay. Well, it's trying to run, sorta, but it's not late. The keys are not latching, which was the original fault. Could we just get it to unlace successfully now so that I can get the tape out? It's stuck on something. I suspect the cassette shell itself. Judging by that noise, I think the top of the cassette might be jamming the unload. Why won't it complete unlace? Or is it complete? Well, I think it might be complete, but it won't allow us to open the cassette door. So we're going to have to find out how to circumvent the interlock that stops you opening the door when it thinks it's still laced. I could take this off, but it doesn't get you anywhere, so I'm not even going to bother. I believe it's fully unlaced. I think we'll take this top panel off to give ourselves better access to the deck. How hard is that? I can't quite remember. I don't think it's too hard. Okay, there should have been 4 screws there. There's one missing here. On later models, N1500, there's another screw down in here with the buttons. Now then, can I remind myself what the interlock is that stops this from opening when it's not fully unlaced? We can gain a little bit more access by undoing this panel. You can't fully operate the machine with this panel removed because with it not in place, it doesn't get the push button operation onto the record and play switches here. So we just have to be aware that it won't play properly without that being down, unless you operate the button like so. And the record button, I think, operates this switch. Okay, let's just go through the lace and unlace, and we'll have a look and see if it's not fully unlacing. So that's lace and unlace. Yeah, you can tell it's not fully unlaced. This motor's still driving. You can hear it still trying to drive, so it's jamming up against something. Well, I don't want to force it, but it's still moving, actually. Maybe we've got to the end of the process because it's switched off. Still can't open it. Let's just check it. Well, it is unlaced because the motor's not trying to run again now. I didn't know if it had a timeout. It doesn't. It doesn't time out. So it's unlaced but jammed in some way that's preventing us from opening this. Right, behind here on this, there's a lever that's shaped like that built into the top of this, and a slide has to go this way to release it. I think I might be able to get to it from here. That's it, that's it. Right, so this was a slide that needed to come across to release the tape. You may have a bit of tape slack. Yeah, a little bit. But that's not bad. We've got the tape out safely. So this slide here is a bit sticky. Now, I found that slide there was a little bit sticky. Okay, it's working now. There we are. So it wasn't coming across when it should. So a little bit of lubrication on that. There we go. A bit of lubrication on that should solve that problem. Then hopefully we can work on the original fault. Okay, that lever is now working perfectly. However, it's not letting us close that again. Let's power it up. Oh, what's wrong? Let's see if we can cycle it from this position. So, laced, unlaced, open. Okay. But it's jamming me out from closing it. What's that? This lever here. Is there something wrong with the spring on this? We might have a problem with the spring on this. I think this spring's supposed to be located just under here. Yeah, I think this spring here is supposed to be under here, under this metal part, and then it pulls this up. So I'll manoeuvre that back into position, and then we'll see if it closes properly. Okay, that's now back in there. So this lock here that stops you from closing it, I think, when the deck's already laced. I'm not quite sure what the reason of that is. What does that do? It will have a purpose, and I'm not sure what it is, but it locks it out at some point. Maybe it locks it out from closing. When the tape's not fully in. Very good design. Well done. So now it closes. All right, we're making progress here. So now we should be able to lace it and unlace it and open it. Good. Let's see now if we're at the position where we were earlier, where the keys wouldn't latch down, and see what that's caused by. So, right, we're at that position again. That was original fault. It's working. It's playing a tape now. It'll rewind. It'll fast forward. But the keys won't stay locked down. Let's investigate that problem. I already happen to know a little bit about what's causing this fault. Just part of the problem. There's a stop solenoid here. And it's preventing this bar here from coming to the top position. Right, so that's where it needs to be in order for the keys to latch. But when we... Is that right? If I hold the bar down, the keys latch. No, right, okay, what's happening is this is not getting to the top of its travel because this is operated. If we switch it off, and power the machine down, clunk, this releases the bar, and now the keys will latch down. So what's happening is that's actuating when it shouldn't. So if I lace up, what should happen is that should... Oh, it's worked, I think. Yeah, it's working this time, but what's been happening a lot of the time is it's been going down. So the machine is now working. Told it was an intermittent fault. And it's playing. And the machine is working fine. And fast forward. Rewind. Fully working. But intermittently, that solenoid has been going down and preventing us from getting the locking bar out of the way. So if I switch it off and on again, let's watch that solenoid. The solenoid is down now. It's actuated. And so the keys won't lock. Switch off. And it's still down. Why is that solenoid activated now? Right, power the machine down. Solenoid removes. Power the machine up. It's fine, but as soon as I switch it on again, I think that solenoid will go down again. Oh, it hasn't this time. So now it's working. What's happening? Now switch it off, the solenoid is stuck down again. Power cycle the machine. And I can use the machine again. Switch machine off, down it goes. And it's staying down, and that's wrong. I think that should just actuate for a moment. But it's staying locked, so what's wrong with that? Power cycle the machine, and it'll work again. Yep, it'll work. Until I unlace, and it goes down and it sticks down. Why has that solenoid been energized? We're going to have to look at the service manual and see if we can work out what its function is. Since we've got the machine basically running again, I wanted to show you what happened with the customer tape. It's a horrible scrambled mess, and that's precisely the horrible scrambled mess that I got on another 1502, which shows that this particular recording was made on a machine that was all over the place in terms of tape alignment. So that's not a fault, that's the machine, or the tape itself, the recording itself. So let's not worry ourselves too much about that. So what we're seeing now is fine until we go to use it a second time, when that solenoid will energize. Oh, it didn't. No, it did. That solenoid is energized now, and it shouldn't be. Until we power cycle it, and then it'll come up, and now we can use the machine. Okay, this tape is a 1700 recording. But it shows that the machine is now working until we use it a second time, and the solenoid will energize, and lock us out. And power cycle it, release the solenoid. Oh, didn't release then. Okay, release the solenoid, and we can use the machine again. Why? And as soon as I hit unlace at this point, the solenoid will energize and stay that way. So it's almost like a logic error on the board that does the logic, which is actually the power supply board underneath. Let's have a look at the service manual and see if we can find out what signals could drive that solenoid, such as something being in the wrong place and causing that to fire the solenoid. Let's just briefly test this machine when it's in its working condition. Within the constraints of probably a fairly tired tape. Yeah, that machine is working fine. So we've just got to solve this problem with the locking mechanism being released by the solenoid S6 when it shouldn't be. So after you've switched it off and switched it back on again, that locking bar is pulled down by S6, and it should be pulled down and released. So it should click now and then pop up. Oh, it just did. It just did. It just worked. So does it now work? Oh yeah, it's now fixed itself. We do like intermittent faults, don't we? Yeah, it's working just fine now. The machine appears to have fixed itself, but let's go through the process of where the fault would lie, and maybe we can work out what we should do to prevent the fault from coming back. So the service manual is fairly good. It does explain a lot of what goes on, and it tells us that switching off, the machine is switched off either with this button here, if that's on, switching it to the off position, so that would be on and that would be off. Switching it to the off position, or the timer switching it off, will send a signal from a relay, which is contacts 1011 of RE101, and that goes to some monostables, and this is absolutely key. There's some solenoids and monostables involved in the off sequence. So let's work through that part of the circuit. Now, I've just read up on this myself. I could be wrong about things, but I don't believe so. Now, this is the signal here. It comes from the relay, and this is a high, it doesn't tell us the voltage, but a high signal which will tell the machine to shut down. Now, something that confused me for a while, I kept seeing these dots on these capacitors and thinking, what are they? That just tells you that they're polyester capacitors. Okay, possibly a bit more detail than we need. Now we have two monostables here, and one of them is associated with solenoid S6 and one of them associated with solenoid S5. And the first thing we should do is work out what they are. So S6 is the one we've been having trouble with. It's over here. And when that activates, it pulls a bar. So there's a actuator. Can I get it? Here. It drops this bar down here, and that releases any key. So if I push that solenoid down, it releases any function key. So that's number 6. Number 5 is this one under here, and it will drop this out of the on and laced operation. So when this one fires, that drops back. So there are two distinct types of offness, if you like. There's the one where you stop a function only, and there's one where you unlace and switch the machine off. So that's why we have two relays, or two solenoids, and two timer circuits. Because In the case, for example, of coming to the end of the tape, you would just operate stop. Now, how does tape stop work on these machines? If you're at the end of the tape, you'll find that in two places actually, there's a piece of foil mounted on the back of the cassette tape, not on the front face that touches the head, but on the back side. And that operates a contact in here, which I think we should be able to see. Let's see if we can find that. It's called SK16, and it's this post here. That post here is SK16. Can you see that? No, let me get you that. So this is SK16 here, and it's an insulated post, and you can see there's a wire on it, and that makes its way round to a board underneath, which we'll come to later. And that tells it that it's reached tape end and will fire this stop button only. Now, the circuitry behind that is there's a delay circuit, but fundamentally there's a delay circuit to power it, but fundamentally what happens is it earths this point here. So when the tape goes through there, it will bridge. Perhaps we should have looked at that some more. When that foil reaches here, it will short circuit this post. I'm not quite clear if it's shorting across this point here or no. I think it connects between this post and this grounded guide. So that grounds that point with that metal foil, I believe. When that happens, this point here will momentarily go low, and we'll have to look at this this timer here. So what's going on? The markings here are in the normal play condition. So there's 40 volts on this transistor, and there's 40 volts here, and there's a high voltage here. It's not telling us what plus 11 is, but I suspect that's 40 volts. So what will be happening is both of these solenoids are just idle. There's no ground point here, so they will sit with 40 volts on both terminals, and they are not actuated. But when this point here goes high, we get a high signal here. This NPN transistor is biased on, grounds this point here, roughly grounds it. The relay or the solenoid will actuate, and that's this one, so it'll be the stop button. But then it operates a timer. Okay, this diode and this diode, they just go up back to the plus 11 supply rail, and all they are for is suppressing back EMF from the solenoids. So this capacitor here is key, 33 microfarads. It's going to take a few seconds for that to, via 6.8K, to charge. So which way will it be? It would normally have a 40 volts here, and it will suddenly be grounded, so that will take this point low here. It will provide a sink of current in that direction, which will stop this from being 40 volts. That will take it low, and this transistor, being PNP, will then conduct. So normally it's at 0 volts here, but it will now conduct. It will go to a higher voltage, and that will keep this transistor biased on via this 4K7 resistor for a period of time until this capacitor has fully charged or discharged. Have to think which way around it goes. That would be 0 now when it's fully discharged. So this is the timing element here for, and there's another one here for these two solenoids. Then here's our auto stop as well, so that can also provide a grounding signal via this 220 nanofarad capacitor. Ground that and operate the one shot. So that's the stop function from the auto stop. This is a similar one-shot system with the same kind of timing element, and that's for operating this relay. Now, in our fault condition, it would have been very nice to have found out whether both solenoids are operating and being stuck on, or whether it was just S6. I think it was just S6, but I don't think we're going to be able to tell by looking at the footage I recorded during the fault condition whether this solenoid was also activated. If that solenoid was also activated, the problem would be back here in the relay, perhaps a sticky relay contact. But I believe it wasn't. I believe that it was only solenoid S6 that had the fault. And if that's the case, we'd be looking at something to do with this timer. And I would start to think of possibly this capacitor being leaky. Now, capacitors today, modern day capacitors, tend to fail in high ESR, high equivalent series resistor mode, where they have a resistor in series that develops in series with the capacitor. Of course, the other thing that can happen is capacitance falls away. But capacitors up to around the early 1970s, which could include this machine just about, tended to fail in a way of developing a resistor across them. So they are leaky, not physically leaky, that's a different thing, but have a leakage across them. Now imagine this capacitor here was bridged by some kiloohms. What would happen is the solenoid would activate, this would go down to a low voltage, switch this transistor on, but the capacitor would never charge. So it would continuously provide a grounding path through this resistor and keep this transistor on, and thereby keep this transistor on, and thereby keep the solenoid activated. So one potential cause of this fault would be that 33 microfarad capacitor. It's relatively unlikely that a capacitor would fail in such a way, but you have to bear in mind these machines are over 50 years old now, and failures happen. So if it's the case that that solenoid only was the one that was sticking down, I would tend to blame that capacitor. There are other possible mechanisms, but most likely that. If both solenoids were remaining activated in the fault condition, then it's likely that this signal here, which goes to a relay, was staying high much longer than it should. Right, so having ascertained that, we should go and have a look at the very least at this capacitor. It's on a board underneath, it's effectively on the power supply board. So we can't test it because in circuit there will be all kinds of paths whereby you will get some resistance across it, and you can't desolder it and then measure it because the act of desoldering it will change its characteristics. Maybe I could snip the wires off it. Sometimes you can snip a wire and make a measurement, but I'm inclined just to replace that capacitor anyway, and then look at it again and see if maybe we can get the fault to come back and see if both solenoids are activated. Right, let's flip the machine upside down and get to this board where that capacitor is. So we've got the PCB layout here. This capacitor here, it might be fairly easy to find. It might be that I can release one end of the capacitor and do some measurements. Right, let's get the machine flipped over and let's have a look at that. Okay, this is the power supply and sort of logic, such as any logic on this machine. C122 is here. Well, access is very good on that. I should easily be able to cut the wire on it and do some measurements. But of course, since the fault has effectively gone away, it might be that the capacitor is reformed anyway. But let's see if we can make any measurements. I could use that nifty device that Mr. Carson of Carson's lab has got. He has a thing that does an eye measurement of leaky capacitors, and that's the sort of thing we need. So this is better suited to testing more modern components that suffer from ESR failure rather than the other way around. But let's test it. I've got a foot pedal for this, which is very handy. So it's reading roughly right. ESR's probably about right for that type of capacitor. What will tend to happen if you have leakage across the capacitor is the capacitance will appear high. And I had that a while ago when I was working on an old Grundig, special rare tape recorder, DC International machine, and I had several capacitors in that appeared to read high in value, and that's because they're going leaky, so it takes longer to charge them. Right, so let's replace that capacitor anyway. Okay, I've replaced that capacitor. I've actually managed to replace it with an even bigger one than the original, but that's rated at 50 volts. And I've tested it, and that's good. The ESR is lower, but of course ESR doesn't matter since there's a series resistor anyway, but it's just possibly telling us about the condition of the capacitor. Right, so we'll see how the machine now performs. Let's test that function. So lace up. And we'll watch how long that solenoid S6 stays active when we switch it off. Active, inactive. Okay, so that's all working properly at the moment. If we have any return of the fault, we can look at it in more detail. But I think this is a fully working machine. So there it is playing. And if I switch it off here, we again should see that solenoid actuate for a few seconds. Activated, released. Good. If you've watched my previous videos, you will know that I have circuit boards here for making up video output circuits for these machines. This particular machine here has got one of my older boards which I'd built on strip board, which was, really time consuming, and I got very fed up doing those. If you require some of these PCBs, let me know. I sell them just in this state, and you can build them up to composite video or S-video configuration, depending whether you do the separate Luma or CVBS, and if you do the separate Luma, then you build up the chroma circuit as well, and potentially have S-video out. I don't do that myself because I feed them into time-based correctors which got digital comb filters, so I don't find that's terribly helpful, but your situation may vary. So these are quite cheap. Forget how much they are. I think £14 for two, including UK post. So I'm not making any real money out of these things, but or other the blank PCBs. So it's much easier and quicker doing that than mucking around soldering up on strip board. Well, I hope you've enjoyed us working on this video recorder, which is approximately 1976, not 1974 as I said earlier, but still getting on 50 years old. It's incredible that it still works at this sort of age. I'll do plenty more content on audio and video technology in the future. Bye for now. Okay, we've been working on an N1502, but the format that it uses is often known as N1500. The real name is VCR, but that's a bit of a vague term. There are two other variants or two other running speeds for the same tapes. So that early one is VCR N1500 and was followed in around 1978 by VCR LP or N1700 as it's often known, and that could run up to, well, with this fairly rare tape, up to 3 hours. Though in theory you could put this tape into one of the early machines as well and it would run for about 80 odd minutes. They didn't advise it because the tape was thin. But then there was the later version, which was a Grundig only, a little bit of a weird thing, Super Video Cassette or Super Video Recording, SVC, SVR. And really it was only one kind of machine for that, the SVR 4004, and I've featured that on the YouTube a few times before. That will only take chrome dioxide tapes, which have an extra piece of plastic in them, which actuates a little switch inside the machine. So though you could use those later tapes on the earlier machines, you couldn't use the early tapes on the later machines because it needed chrome dioxide. But this is chrome dioxide. So if you were to add a piece of plastic in there, and it's not hard to do, or actually you can just put anything across there, or you bypass the switch in the machine, which people used to do at the time, you could, in theory, from this tape, I'd calculate, get over 5 hours of recording, which is quite something for a format that, you know, its roots go back to 1972. And I don't see any reason in the world that that wouldn't work. Being a chrome dioxide tape, I think that would give you your 5 hours and 10 minutes or so of recording on the SVR 4004. Just thought I'd mention that. Bye for now.